Jayanti. Very good evening, good afternoon, Jayanti Ben. On behalf of Asia family, Malaysia would like to extend a warm welcome to you and would like to offer you a simple bouquet. Please accept on behalf of the Asia family. And today we have 10 countries from Asia listening to you about Dadi's experience. I also would like to extend many greetings for this auspicious day of celebration of 14th year of Dadi's memorial. And Jayanti Ben had the opportunity to be with Dadi more than 50 years, I know. And I think Jayanti Ben is the luckiest one. She had the opportunity to spend time in Madhuban, London, and touring around with Dadi in many places. And I'm sure Jayanti Ben has many moments and memories that she will share with us today, and that will become very alive in our lives. So, Jayanti Ben, we are looking forward to hear from you, your moments and memories with Dadi Prakashmani. Thank you.
Thank you, Miraben. It's a joy and privilege to be with all of Asia and to share stories of Dadiji. And today is a very wonderful day, the day that Dadi became the angel. Even in a physical form here, we would still see her as an angel. But yet, of course, that angel flew up above, and that was very, very special. And I think, according to drama, Madhuban waited several days for all of us to arrive so that then we could all be part of that celebration of Dadi becoming the angel. And so let me start the journey in Karachi, because I think that that was a very significant aspect about what was to happen later. They say that whatever happens is a foreteller of events that develop later. And so the fact that Dadiji was the very first Kumari to come to Baba and surrender, even before Mama, so that I feel is a very significant factor. And Baba put Dadiji in charge of teaching the younger ones. She must have been 15 years old at that time, but together with Dadi Chandramani, Dadi Shantamani, and Mittu Dadi, these were the ones who were already called Dadis right at the start, because they were the ones who were the teachers for the little ones like Ishu Dadi, Gulzar Dadi, and Lachu Dadi. So all the little ones were being taught by these teachers. So Dadi was a Dadi already when she was 15. And I think another aspect of all of that was that she was always Mama's right hand. And at one point, some would call her Muni Mama, 3/4 Mama. And so she was already almost like Mama. And you'll see many photographs of her in Bharat also, when she would travel with Mama here and there as Mama's assistant and right hand. And so, yes, we got a glimpse of her leadership qualities right from the very start. And then out of the whole community, Baba asked Dadiji and Dadi Ratan Moini to go to Japan for the worldwide religious conference that was being held for religious leaders. And so you see many photographs of both of them in Japan. And of course, it was a very lovely scene when we see those photographs, and we understand that that organization that had hosted her still is in contact with Baba's family in Tokyo. And the woman who heads up that organization today had come to meet me when I was in Tokyo a few years earlier. So the seeds that were planted at that time continue till now to bear fruit. And so the connection with that organization still continues. Another aspect of the early signs of Dadi's leadership was how in October 1968, Baba asked her to stay in Madhuban when Didi was going to go on tour. And I was actually in Madhuban, and Baba was asking me to join Didi on her tour. And Dadi was at that time being asked by Baba to stay in Madhuban. And what we didn't know, but Baba knew, was that this was going to be the training for Dadiji. Just 3 months, no longer, that's it. But in 3 months, Baba gave her an understanding of what was happening in the whole yagya and the financial situation of the yagya and whatever else she needed to know. And of course, she had been treasurer for the yagya right in the early days in Karachi. And so she was used to that, but Baba, in a sense, preparing her for what was to happen in January a bit later. So she stayed that period from October through till January. In January, Baba was asking her to go back to Bombay. And she said to Baba, but I don't see who can be with you, Baba, and there are parties coming all the time. And so Baba then said, okay, child, as you wish. And so she stayed on. And of course, then the last drishti, the last touch of Baba's hands was the inheritance she took from Baba to be the one who was to read the Murli. And of course, then to lead the yagya for decades and decades, a very, very long period. And I remember coming to Madhuban on the 20th, that's right, 18th night, Baba left, 20th. I was in Abu. I'd come with the people, the teachers from Agra Center, where Baba had settled me for service. And so when we heard the news, then in the morning they said, would you like to go? And they were going, and I said yes. And Jyoti Ben, who's now in London, was with me. And so we both traveled to Abu with them. And we saw Dadi Kamarka in the meditation hall, the history hall. And Baba was lying there. They had made arrangements, and Baba's face was just like a blooming rose. There was no sign of any problem or difficulty or discoloration. The purity of the chariot was such that everything seemed absolutely fine, as if Baba was just quietly resting. And Dadi was there in Tapasya. And then the next morning was when Dadiji actually was the one who announced that 21st, Shiv Baba had sent the message that the cremation would happen and that bhog would be offered that evening. And of course, the bhog was not just an offering of bhog with the message, but it was an offering of bhog in which Dadi Gulzar flew to Baba, and Baba actually came. Shiv Baba came and spoke to all of us. And within that, at one point towards the end, after Baba had explained that your elder sisters are the ones who will look after you, you won't elect or select somebody else to take Baba's place. Baba was a father, and you don't select somebody, but the family, the elders of the family look after the younger members of the family. And Baba picked up a rose and put it on Didiji's head. Baba picked up a rose from the silver plate that's always put for bhog with the flowers on top, the roses, and another rose was for Dadiji. And so Baba was already crowning both of them at that time. But of course, Dadiji then was the one who continued to hold the yajna together all of those years. So Dadi's been the leader, and it's been a very natural role for her to play. My first personal meeting with Dadiji was May 1968. I might have seen her before that as a child or as a teenager going to Madhuban. This was just about a month after I'd started classes properly and had decided that I wanted to be a regular student. And Dadi Janki had suggested we go to Mahabaleshwar, which is a mountain hill resort near Pune. And she told us that Dadiji was going to be there with a group from Bombay, and a small group from Pune was going to also assist. And did we want to go there? So Rajniben, my Lokik mother, and myself went along, and we were part of that group who was doing the exhibitions. And Dadiji, in the early morning, would conduct 4 o'clock meditation, and it would be amazing because there was the moonlight, and already Dadi had silver hair, not completely white like later, but it was already silver. And so the rays of the moonlight touched Dadi's hair and made it glisten, and her face was sparkling as she conducted Amrit Vela. And as she read Murli, we would sit in the open air and do morning Amrit Vela and Murli outside on the lawns there. And it was such a joy to hear Dadi read the Murli even then. At that time, she was the head of Maharashtra, the state where Bombay and Pune are. And so in that capacity, she had organized this particular exhibition. And the lovely thing was that Chandruben from San Francisco and myself were the two of the youngest people around at that time. And so sometimes she would say to us, we were together for about 5 days, so it wasn't a huge amount of time, but long enough. But sometimes after breakfast, she would say to us, come, I'll walk with you, because we were in a boarding school which was vacant because it was summer holidays in India. And it was a little bit out of town. And then we'd walk into the town, and there was an exhibition space in the town hall, the big hall. And so Baba's instruction had been have these exhibitions everywhere where there are the summer resorts where people come and they have time to study these things. So it was that sort of background. And then sometimes there would be hills going up and down that we would cross to get to this place, about 25-minute walk, which was fine. But Dadi would hold our hand and would say, come, let's run. And she would run down the hill with us. And on the way back again, Mahabaleshwar is famous for strawberries in the mountains. And so she would get strawberries and say, okay, let's enjoy these before we go for our lunch. And so on the way back, we would be having strawberries with her. And so she was constantly on the lookout for new ones, young ones, to support them and help them. And so it was a very lovely experience. And then in January, of course, a very striking memory that I have is of Dadi's composure and how Dadi managed to keep herself totally calm, except for one moment. In the morning of the 21st, when Dadi's announcing that the final rites, the cremation was going to happen that day, Dadi's voice broke just very slightly. But the impact of that was that people started to have tears. And she noticed that and so immediately caught hold of herself and carried on very calmly. And so somebody that they had lived with for so many years in Karachi and Abu and loved so dearly, and now suddenly Baba had become avyakt. It was a shock. But then, of course, Baba's Murli was so powerful that everybody was absolutely calmed by it, and it was very beautiful. But next morning, 22nd morning, when Dadi picked up the Murli to read the Murli to the gathering, and we were still just in the history hall, and so half the people were inside and half the people were still outside, and even inside it was cramped. And Dadiji began with just a touch of emotion. But again, she managed. Can you imagine what her feelings must have been as this was, a Murli was being read in Madhuban for the first time? Because until then, Baba would speak the Murli. It wasn't read. Baba would be there to speak the Murli. So, and wherever it is that Baba traveled, the Murli was there. Bombay, the Murli was there. Delhi, the Murli was there. And so even in Madhuban then, they would get the notes and they would read that. But of course, they knew that Baba was speaking it. And now it was time for a new chapter, a new phase. But Dadi took on that mantle of leadership so sweetly, so lightly, so easily. And Baba had given very clear guidance about what should happen. And Dadi and Didi absolutely followed those instructions. The trainings for Kumaris, and then the other teachers to come, then every group, the mothers, the brothers, everybody to have an opportunity to come for a retreat. And the beautiful thing was how not only Didi and Dadi working together, Dadi, the mic, and Didi, the might. Dadi, the light, Prakashmani, the jewel of light, and Didi, the might, the powerhouse. And they would laugh and say, it's two bodies, but it's one soul. They would always collaborate and share together, and there would be no decisions made singly, but always the two. And Dadiji and her humility, and of course Didi too, but they managed to gather all the other Dadis together with them, because it wasn't going to be just one or two individuals who would lead the yajna. They said to the Dadis, we need all of you to be with us and support us. It's Baba's yajna, it's your yajna. And so with their love and humility, they brought all the Dadis together so that that became the strength of the yajna, the foundation. Normally, when a charismatic leader leaves, then there's a power struggle. But in this case, the transition was absolutely smooth. No problems, no trouble at all. Very, very smooth. And through that period in which I was in India until June. So there was Baba, then there was a situation of the Kumaris training, then another Kumaris training, and then the Bhattis. But in between, Baba had given instructions on the 17th of January to purchase this place where the idea was to have the museum. So that building, you've heard the story sometimes in Madhuban, how Ramesh Bhai was given instructions by Baba to buy that property. And that became the museum. And Dadi, of course, was the supervisor of that. There were other people who were giving ideas and looking after the construction and all the things. But every night Daddy would sit with them to understand what had happened so far and what further needed to happen. And so the first museum that was constructed in Abu, that was very much Baba's plan, but Dadi became the instrument to make it actually a reality. And there was a very sweet experience that I had during that time, because I came to Abu for the Kumaris training and then stayed on. So from April through to May and then further, I was there in Abu. And of course, it was a small family, and Dadiji was very available for chit chat, for questions. It was a very lovely time. But during that period, by then, they had also called Dadi Janki to Abu to be the teacher for the different bhattis, and in particular, the teacher for the teachers, the Kumaris training that was happening. So Dadi Janki had this idea, and she wouldn't leave me. She kept saying, you need to go back to London. You need to go back to London. And it was like, one form, the stern father. So Dadi Janki played that role. And the other side, Dadi Prakashmani, the sweet mother. And she would see that I was very unhappy at the thought of going back to London, because I thought I'd be living in India forever. And Dadi Kumarka would say to Dadi Janki, leave her alone. She'll go when she's ready. Just leave her now. And so Dadi would be quiet. But then finally, of course, it must have got to Baba. And then in one of our meetings, lots of personal meetings with Baba in those days. And so Abhyakt Baba then said to me, Baba wants to send you for service, not for karmic accounts. Baba knew the button to push, of course. And so then I came back to London. And it was by then Dadiji and Dadi Janki, and of course they were all there when Baba spoke to me. So they all supported this, and I came back. And India had been great for me because there had been so much service, which was a real joy. It was such a novelty for me. And then London, and wherever I wrote letters on this little old typewriter that happened to be around, and I would knock off with 2 fingers. But there wasn't much response from any of the letters I was sending out or the phone calls I was making. And then by the time it was August, so I was back in June in 1969. And by August, I was thinking, well, I've tried whatever it is I can think of, and I don't know what further to do. So I wrote a letter to Dadiji, because she'd said to me, if you write clearly, I'll be able to read it. Dadi spoke a few words of English, but understood English. And so I wrote to Dadiji and wrote to her saying that there's no service in London. Dadiji, there's so much service to be done in India. Can I come back to India? And Dadiji sent me a very sweet reply. And I think Rosie Ben must have been in Madhban at the time, because the letter came back in English. Otherwise, Dadi would write sometimes in Hindi or Sindhi, because my mother was there. She could read Sindhi, and I could, by then I'd learned to read Hindi. So, but this letter came in English. And in that, so I think it was Rosie Ben, so in that, Dadi's writing and saying that, yes, she's heard the news and so on. But even if there isn't service outside, there's always self-service. That's it. That became my magic formula. And I remember that I'd had the question, well, the Dadis had 14 years of tapasya, and as soon as we come to Baba, we get thrown into service. When are we going to have that chance? And here was Dadi's answer. This is your time for self-service. So she opened up an avenue for me, which was perfect. And so it started me off on my journey on a deep, deep spiritual transformation. And so in every 2 hours, I do 30 minutes of yoga, and I would keep a chart of soul consciousness. So it was highly beneficial and exactly what I needed. It kept me safe, it kept me sane, it kept me close to Baba, close to the family. And of course, my deepest desire was, how soon can I go back to Madhuban again? But there was something else that happened in between, and that was that service again started slowly, slowly after a year of tapasya. So then in 1971, we get a letter from Dadi Janki. I'm in Madhuban, Jagdish Pai and Ramesh Pai have spoken to me, and Baba has said yes to them to go on tour to foreign countries. Would you like them to stop in London first before they go to the USA? They had an invitation for a Hatha Yoga conference, but of course Hatha Yoga, then they also have meditation and so on. But that invitation had come to Ramesh Pai, and so this is how that started. And when that letter from Dadi Janki came, we thought, this is amazing, absolutely fantastic. And my father was happy to host 5 of them. So they called them, Baba called them the 5 Musketeers. So Dadi, Didi, Dadi Janki must have discussed the names with Baba. And it was then Jagdish Pai, Ramesh Pai, Dr. Nirmala, Rosiben, and Dadi Shilendra. And Dadiji, of course, masterminding things and helping them sort out their travels and everything. But they came and stayed in London a month, and the outcome that a centre got established in London at that time, October 1971. So Dadiji's letters were always, always full of inspiration and support. And when I went back to India, and again, I said, I want to stay in India forever. But Baba, together with the Dadis this time, Dadi Kumarka and Didi, the plan was that Dadi Janki would come to London and then see how to develop things. And it was Dadi Kumarka again who said that, yes, definitely, Dadi Janki would be the right person to go. And then Baba put a stamp on it. And so Dadi Janki came abroad. And when we'd go to Madhuban, because Dadi Janki right from the beginning had this image of a model of Madhuban, but also preparing souls to come to Madhuban. And so when the first travelers arrived in Madhuban, December 74 was the first big group. We heard a Murli recently in which Baba was speaking to that group in particular. But it was very lovely how Dadiji would welcome everyone with such a big and open heart. And Dadiji would say, you should all keep coming to Madhuban again and again. And she would say, come and stay in Madhuban. Come and stay for as long as you want. And so she meant that fill yourself and then go back and serve. But her generosity of spirit, that created the first Brahmins. There, in different places, they took Gyan, but they became Brahmins in Madhuban, in the sense that the heart connection was then created with Bap-Dada, but also Madhuban. And everybody who had come back from Madhuban in those early days would say that their apron had been filled with blessings, not only from Baba, but also from Dadi and Didi. Dadi's care and love was amazing. She would hold a meeting with the Madhuban Nivasis, and I sometimes was there. This would be before the arrival of the foreigners. Usually the season would be in February, but end of January, she would have a meeting of all the Madhvan Nivasis, all the department people. And she would say to them, when these people come from abroad, I ask myself the question, how would Baba have welcomed them? And I know that Baba invoked these souls in the days of Karachi, in the days of Mount Abu Tapasya time, in the early 50s. So I know Baba would have welcomed them with such love. So I want you all to give them that experience of Baba's love, of being welcomed back to their home. And so Dadi would put the stamp on this. And so every single department of Madhuban would just go out of their way to share time and love and energy and support on whatever level was needed. So Dadi, really, the one who moved foreign service abroad onto a very, very different level, just through that welcome that she gave everybody in Madhuban and the sustenance that she gave. Of course, we would have the morning Murli, but very often she would have teachers' classes that she would attend and conduct herself. Sometimes she would sit with us for meetings. One particular episode, and it happened in the 80s, but it's in the context of meetings, so I'll share it. There was a meeting that we were having, some people from abroad, and then, of course, the two Dadis. Didi would sometimes be in meetings, sometimes not. And Dadi Gulzar used to join us for meetings also. And there was an agenda item that came up. And one individual within the meeting became very, very angry. And he was really not quite right. And he was saying things to Dadiji that I don't think I could have tolerated for myself. And it was difficult enough to hear them being spoken to Dadiji. But Dadiji's face, the smile never left her face. And instead, she was just in agreement. Whatever this brother was saying was okay. And then that person finished. And then she went on to the next item on the agenda. And this time, she again asked that same angry person what he thought about the situation, whatever that item was. And in that tiny little space of time, it was like something must have triggered his awareness too. And so he now was calm and he responded very politely. And so the atmosphere again changed back to one of support and cooperation. So from being one of support and cooperation, suddenly there was this influx of negative energy. But Dadiji ignored it completely. If she hadn't asked that brother again, maybe things would be different in that the brother might say, well, she's ignoring me, or the ideas that are coming forward are not so useful. What's the point? It could have been many thoughts. But Dadiji asked the same person, and he spoke in a very normal tone, giving a very reasonable answer, and the past was forgotten. Now, on a human level, if somebody is defaming me in company, in public, some seniors and many juniors there, I would feel I've been insulted so badly. Now, why do I want to give the same person another opportunity to attack? But Dadiji didn't think like that. She immediately approached that person. Literally, we saw her put a full stop to what has just happened and move on. And this person, of course, as I say, now is quite normal. But I'm sure that that trigger for realization was possible only because Dadi herself was totally calm and was able to have the courage and the faith to say, okay, let's move on. And this is the next question that we have to answer. So Dadi's capacity for tolerance, whether physical pain, we saw that also when she had very bad back, but also emotional abuse, I would say, that was coming to her, and she stayed calm. Could I have done that? I wonder. I know that I don't think I could have managed that. Maybe I'd have kept silent, but definitely I wouldn't have had the courage or the conviction or the faith to say, okay, what do you think about this item now? I'd have thought, okay, at least God's made him quiet now. I don't need to open up the door again. But her faith and her courage, and she did, and it worked out beautifully. Otherwise, there would have been that shadow hanging in the room. But she knew what was the right thing to do. And so that's how that energy shifted. Another memory I want to share is of Dadi, and Dadi coming to, first of all, Germany on her grand 1977 tour, because Germany had brought a group of tourists to Abu. They had positioned it beautifully. Surya and Sister Suman were there, and it had been positioned in a brochure as a journey of adventure and the places that they would visit, things that normally tourists in India want to do, but also very specifically 4 days in Mount Abu to have a deep spiritual experience. And I can't forget the number because it was significant. 108 people came on that journey with Suman and Surya. That was amazing. They stayed in a hotel, but they would come for meditation in Baba's house, and it was really lovely. The thing, and a TV crew had accompanied them, filming everything from the beginning through the middle to the end. And so they were there filming when Dadiji gave drishti, Didi gave drishti, and then gave everybody in the audience toli and fruits and so on. So that was captured by TV, and it was actually relayed on German television way back in the 70s. Probably that would have been around 1978 that it was shown on British television, on German television. The whole documentary was in German. So it was Dadi's desire. Germany wants me to come. They've made this amazing program. I'm going to go there. So first stop was Germany, and that was beautiful, very lovely service. Second stop was London. And London, we'd organized all these programs, which, I mean, if I think about it, they were quite amazing. But Dadi, so light, so easy, laughing, joking. And do you know who she traveled with? Only Ramesh Bhai. That's it. She didn't have a Brahmani she traveled with, no assistant. Ramesh Bhai and Dadi traveled together on their own. So Dadi, very light, very easy, and a lot of fun. I remember Dadi Janki kidnapping her and taking her off to Blackpool one evening. We were in the north, in Manchester, around there, and we had a couple of mayors lined up in the program, and they haven't come. What happened? Why have they not come from where they were traveling from. I was in Manchester, so I wasn't with them on the car journey, and no mobile phones in those days. So finally, when they did arrive, by then a lot of the speeches had happened, but they arrived in time, just at the end, for Dadi to say a few words and meet the mayors. And the two Dadis were laughing, laughing, laughing. We decided we'd go to see the lights in Blackpool. And so for them, it was just very light and easy. And they knew the program would be fine. So the program was also okay. But just an indication of Dadi's lightness. Another very interesting story that maybe most don't know. While Dadi was in London, Dadi had several phone calls from Jyotiben, who's now in London. And she was in New York at the time. And she was phoning from New York and saying to Dadi, Dadi, you have to come. You're coming so far. You're going to be in the Caribbean. How can you not come to the United States? Please, Dadi. And so Dadi said to me, I didn't have time to get my American visa in India. Can we get it here? And I tried, but I knew that it wasn't possible. And then I remembered, because by then Caribbean service had started. Miraben will remember, Rajni Ben will remember. So I remembered one individual, a man called Ram Kriplani, who owned big department stores in Trinidad at that time. That's changed, or that's gone. But at that time, he was like very powerful. And so I phoned him and I said, is it possible for you to organize a visa for Dadi to go to the USA? She must go. There's somebody who desperately is asking for her to come. And he said, well, let Dadi come here. I'll have her meet with the American ambassador, and then we'll see what God wants. And so that's exactly what happened. Dadi went to Guyana, Dadi went to Trinidad, and meeting the American ambassador. And of course, Baba's touching, Dadi's radiant personality. And the guy says, yes, it's never happened that you have an Indian passport and you're out of your home country and you get a visa for the USA in a third country. But it happened. And so Dadi then went from the Caribbean to the USA. And Dadi stood outside the UN building, saw all those flags of all the different countries, and Baba's guidance, Baba's touching, and she says, one day, Shiv Baba's flag will also fly here. And we're waiting for that day, but at least Baba's work has had a big connection with the UN, as many of you know. So Dadi went with that thought that this one sister is asking me to come. I can't say no. But it kicked off service in the US. It needed something like Dadi to give it that push. And so New York, the center started a little while later. But meanwhile, another center started in Texas, the first center in San Antonio. And so Dadi's visit to the USA established a center and also planted the seeds for the service there at the UN. So very lovely experiences with Dadi while traveling. That same year, after again, when Dadi left New York, again, there was something very interesting. Dadi's flight has taken off from New York, and what Ramesh Pai and Dadiji say afterwards, we saw all the lights suddenly go out in New York, down below. New York has lots of lights, even in those days it had lots of lights, but all the lights suddenly went off. But our flight had taken off. So meanwhile, here in London, we got the news that there's a massive blackout in New York. It was 7777. again, a date that you don't have to think about, but such an easy date to remember. Her flight takes off, and at 7 p.m. at night in New York, everything is in darkness. Next morning, we're hearing the news of the blackout and we're wondering what's happened, but the airport tells us that yes, Dadi's flight is taken off and Dadi arrived safe. Dadi's flight was the last flight to take off from New York. It was a magical journey, amazing. Dadi went to Africa, a few places there, then came to Mauritius. But one thing that nobody had anticipated or prepared for was the fact that from being in the Northern Hemisphere where it was summer, it was now the Southern Hemisphere in South Africa, Mauritius, around there, and it was cold. And so Dadi traveling from one country, and she was in Bulawayo. At that time, it was called Rhodesia. Now it's Zimbabwe. So she was in that country, and there was a few hours wait till she got to Mauritius for the next flight. And in a very natural way, one can imagine why and how, but I'm meeting Dadi in Australia. So I prepared for Dadi in Hong Kong. Now I'm come to Australia, but the flights were such that Dadi arrived a few hours earlier than me. And Dadi's cold, and Dadi's caught a cold. And there's only brothers in the center, and there's a couple of sisters helping her. But I arrive and they tell me Dadi's got a bad cold. And it was actually flu, whatever, bug. And then Dadi has that half-day rest, and then she's fine. And she continues with the tour. Amazing stamina, amazing endurance, and no thought. I'm the head of the organization. You know, how should things be? So simple, just love for Baba, love for service, and so on. And it was Dadiji's support that really gave a boost to world service to happen. Her journey, that gave a huge amount of support and inspiration to so many centers in Australia and in Asia. I think she came to Malaysia at that time also. So amazing things. For where Dadi steps foot, service flourishes. And so it was a very beautiful experience. She left me behind in Hong Kong. Again, Dadi's presence and beautiful service happened in Hong Kong, because after Australia, I had journeyed with her to Hong Kong. And the day before I'm supposed to travel back to India with her. And the day before she's leaving, she calls me and says, Jayanti, I'm seeing there's so much service here. I want to make a request. She put it so humbly, so sweetly that no way could I say no. Will you stay behind here in Hong Kong? And I said, Dadi, without you? And she says, well, I have to get back to Madhuban. And I couldn't say no. I said, okay, if that's what you wish, Dadi. And so at that point, I think I spent from July through to October in the East, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Philippines. But Dadi Savitri was there. There was a little center there. So it was a lovely time to be there. But we said goodbye to Dadiji at that point. And December, when we've all come to Madhuban again, we've come to Madhuban in December at that point. And of course, Baba sees everything from up above. And Dadi organizes a special meeting for the countries that Dadi had visited with Baba in Baba's room. Just her loving care and concern and inspiration and sustenance. Well, some of you have experienced it, but that was a very sweet meeting. And it's a meeting, again, I won't forget, because Baba looks at the German people and says, Germany is number one, and then explains. And then Baba looks at the London group and says, UK is number one. And I'm beginning to understand where Baba's going. And then Guyana is number one. Then Trinidad is number one. And so for Baba, everyone was number one. It's a beautiful way to see things. But it was Dadi who made that happen in such a beautiful way. So how many more stories? But again, very, very significant that when we started our international projects, Dadi understood immediately what we were trying to do. Her intellect was wide, it was broad and subtle, because Million Minutes wasn't your traditional conference, lectures, any of that. It was very different. But when we explained to Dadi what we were trying to do, Dadi understood and Dadi supported. And sometimes there'd be others who would say, what about this? What about this? What about this? And Dadiji would call a few of us and say, you know, I know it's Baba's touching that's making you do this. And you've checked it with Baba, with Dadi Gulzar. So Baba's with you, Dadi's with you. You carry on and don't listen to anything else. And so Dadi's support and sustenance during that period, again, amazing. One last story. And it was immediately after Global Cooperation had its first big gathering in Abu. We'd created this pattern that we called international patrons and then national committees in every country, so that we could invite outsiders to participate with us in service that wasn't traditional service, but it was very much service of the whole tree, not just the roots of the tree and the the deity family for the future, but really just giving a message that made sense to people. And it was very connected with values. So again, Dadiji supported us 100%. But by then, having seen the results of Million Minutes, 7 Peace Messenger Awards for Dadi, Madhuban, and 7 countries, 6 countries. Madhuban, the International Award, and 6 other countries. So people were really keen to support global cooperation now. And in that, there was a situation in which we invited the international patrons to come, and it was the first time that somebody from Russia had actually come to Madhuban. And so Russia's service started a bit later. So this would have been 88, around, or 89, maybe early 89. And at that point, there was an international conference. First, we had a meeting of all these patrons. They came to Madhuban, and we had a meeting with them to discuss the future of the project. And Dadiji, Jagdish Pai attended some of the meetings. But then what happened was there was a conference, and they'd wanted to have these people attend the conference and also speak at the conference. But basically, it was a conference for Bharatvasis, and it was in Om Shanti Bhavan. And so all these guests, the UN Assistant Secretary General, Dr. James Jonah, Lord Ennals, different people from across the world, high-level people, they're all sitting there. And I don't know who was translating, but a senior person stood on the podium and spoke about the sermonizer of the Gita, which on one level is fine, but it then went into many other matters. And I was also listening to the translation, and my heart was about to have failure, because I was hearing things like, it's going to be the time of the Mahabharat wars, things like this. And Lord Ennals and James Jonah are sitting side by side. They were the co-chairs, and they start looking at each other, then talking to each other. Then they say to us, we think that this isn't really meant for us, and it's probably best that we leave now. And so that whole section where these top level people were sitting left the room. And a few of us were connected with the project, went out with them. And of course, we understood their concerns. They said we came for an international meeting, and then we thought we were attending a peace conference, and we don't understand what's going on. I said to them, okay, what I'd like to do is have you meet with Dadi Prakashmani. And they loved Dadi because Dadi had such an impact on them. And the conference went on. Then after that, there was a cultural thing. Dadi had to be part of that. And so 11 o'clock at night, Gayatri Ben and myself had waited in Baba's room to meet with Dadi. So by 11 o'clock at night, things are finished. Dadi's given gifts to the artists who are performing. That's how things work. And she came to a room, and we were waiting in Baba's room, and we knew she'd come. So we then went to her room, and we said, Dadi, really, we're sorry, and we don't want to disturb your sleep, but this is what has happened. The guests are quite disturbed. And she said, leave it to Baba, leave it to me, but tell them they must attend tomorrow morning session. I'm not scheduled to speak, but I'll speak. And we sent the message around next morning. And so they all came to that morning session. And then Dadi put it in such a beautiful way. It's an organization for peace. We are working for peace. And sometimes people don't fully understand what's going on, but truly, what are the values of the organization and the fact of the world being one family and God being the parent in charge. And Baba spoke through her, and these people were smiling as they heard her. Dadi had done Baba's magic, and all of them were absolutely content. And so, end of session, and they come to meet Dadi to thank her for sorting out their questions and concerns. And Dadi said to them, you know, I think you've been sitting indoors long enough. Now I want you to go and experience what Mount Abu has to offer. Go to the mountains, go to the temples, enjoy what there is here. You've only got a couple of days left. And so I don't want you to sit in conferences anymore. And it was a wonderfully diplomatic way to make sure that there was nothing that was out of line that they would hear, but also that they really enjoyed their experience of Madhuban. So Dadi was a magician for God, truly, truly. So, as I say, many beautiful memories of Dadiji, but Dadi's leadership was love, law, humility, an instrument, but a perfect instrument who became a perfect angel. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, Jayanti. It is so amazing. You know, we all feel like sitting for another hour, listening to you, all your touching experiences. It has definitely inspired many of us about Dadi's personality and your encounter with her. And now I would like to invite Perubai to say a few words of thanks. And after that, please stay back for a Thanksgiving meditation to Dadi Prakashmani. Perubai.
Thank you, Miraben. Jayanti Ben, it is a pleasure to have you around. It is not a class actually, it's a family get together. And it's also a story time. And generally Brahmins like story. And whatever we learn from the Murli sometimes looks like how to translate that into an actual practice. So when stories are shared, definitely we can relate Gyan there. And when seniors, when they've gone through so much in their life, to build up the organizations and make it easier for us who come later. Definitely, we would like to look forward to hear what they went through and basically live the life together with them and experience what was those days, the early days of Yagya. So definitely it helps us. And also the application of the knowledge becomes much more easier when we hear stories. And on your part, because you have so much of experience with the seniors, we who came later part of the years, definitely we have to learn a lot. My first encounter with you, Jayanti Ben, was in 1985, and that's the year Dadi Prakashmani visited Malaysia also. And we had a big public program, and the topic or the theme of the public program is the turning point, which is basically my own turning point also. As for Dadi Prakashmani, I still enjoy having ice cream with her in Madhuban. Those are the days. And she is the one who gave me the ring, the golden ring, which I'm wearing now. And she also used to give shawls those days. And very important experience with her is getting the go soon, come soon toli when we leave Madhuban. So obviously, for me, Dadi Prakashmani have a lot of, I have emotional relationship with her. And so hearing firsthand from you, definitely it means a lot. And for us here on this part of the world, it's a big family actually tonight, gentlemen. We have up from China to down from Singapore, all are listening to your class today. So many thanks for you for allocating some time to be with us. And also thanks to the UK family for allowing you to be with us today. So thank you very much, Jayanti, and we will meet again and again. Such sustenance is definitely necessary for us because it's still a lockdown time for us over here. No? And such sustenance definitely goes a long way to help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
दीदी बोल रही है लेकिन माइक दीदी बोल
जो राह थी दिखाई दादी जी आपने उस ज्ञान के सुपथ पर चलते ही जाएंगे दादी जी आपको ना हम भूल पाएंगे जो साथ में बीते पल वो याद आएंगे जो दिन बीते दादी के संग उन्हें अमर बनाना चाहे हम तो दादी के अरमानों का आओ संसार सजाएं हम हमें प्यार बहुत है दादी से दादी बिन रह ना पाए हम त्याग तपस्या सेवा की साकारी मूरत होकर नाम किया है सार्थक अपना ज्ञान किया भा देकर सिखाया तुमने हमको आपस में मिलकर चलना, ना दुख देना किसी को, निरहंकारी रहना। दादी हमारी दादी, दादी ओ प्यारी दादी, दादी हमारी दादी, दादी ओ मीठी दादी। सूरज सी फैली किरणें जिसके तेज ललाट से, जन जन को शीतल किया जिस पावन गंगा घाट से। तेरे कर्म हमें देते भगवान की पहचान है, तेरे कर्म हमें देते भगवान की पहचान है। ओ मीठी प्यारी दादी तुम्हें कोटि कोटि प्रणाम है, ओ मीठी प्यारी दादी तुम्हें कोटि कोटि प्रणाम है।
Thank you very much for all of you to be part of this gathering. And I'm sure all of you have enjoyed every second of being in Jayanti's company and her words of wisdom. So I wish you all a very good night and stay happy and stay healthy. Good night.